I'm a big believer that when you want to do something, find the people who've already done it and go and make friends with them and ask them those questions. So that's what I did. And there was a real split between, some people said that they wrote the book very much as like a lead generation tool, and there was like downloadable resources and you put your email in, and others sort of went a different direction. And I really, really cherish books. I'm a real sort of book nerd.
Step into the world of success with your brand amplified, the ultimate podcast designed to unravel the intricacies of thriving businesses. I'm your host, Annika Jackson, and I'm on a mission to uncover the stories, strategies, and secrets that have propelled entrepreneurs and business leaders to success. Phil Treagus-Evans coming to us from the evening in the UK, where it's still very sunny out because the sunset's very late. Thank you so much for being here. We're going to talk about human-centered marketing, which is so important in this AI world and something I'm really excited to dive into with you.
It's a pleasure to be here, and I look forward to our conversation.
Yeah. So you are CEO of Giraffe Social, a social media agency. You've also had a couple of other businesses, and you have an Amazon best-selling book.
I do, yeah. Although before this podcast, I was watching one of your other podcasts, and he was a New York Times bestseller, so I immediately feel inadequate.
Oh, no, no such thing on this podcast. You're a bestseller, and also I think a lot of the work that you do, your bestseller is called Human First Marketing.
Yeah. The
Art of Being Seen, Trusted, and Remembered. And this is something I talk a lot about with my university students and in just general conversations. Yes, we're in this world with a lot of technology, but the core is always going to be that authenticity and that trust factor. So before we dive into your book, I'd love to hear a little bit about your background, your other companies before you became CEO of Giraffe Social and decided to kind of make that the flag that you stand on.
I think that's the interesting thing, is that I don't know if I ever really decided that was my thing. I think I probably just stumbled into this. So coming out of university, I started a business with a friend of mine. We were 20 years old, and thought, wouldn't it be a good idea to start our own social network? We had no money and no experience, no skills really. But that didn't stop us. We had a good go, and we spent all of our money on having a very complicated website designed, which meant we had no money for marketing whatsoever. So at the time, social media was still not really being used for marketing as much, but it was just starting to. So we grew up with social media, so we used that as our main platform for marketing the website. And when the site went live, we ended up crashing our web designer's server, which sounds cool, but was terrifying at the time. And we had around 1,000 users in the first few weeks, which, considering we had no marketing budget, was a big success. However, as I said earlier, we didn't really have the capital or the knowledge on sort of user retention and further sort of user acquisition to really make a good go of it. However, whilst we were doing that, a few of our friends who were in bands and some of our family members who had businesses were sort of seeing what we were doing and saying, hey, could you do this for us? Could you do this for our business or for gigs coming up? So we did. And I remember one day we just said, do you think we should start a safer business, like a plan B? and that business is Giraffe. So, we spent a year planning this website that doesn't exist anymore. And we started Giraffe in an afternoon. And 13 years later, it's grown into one of the more recognizable social media agencies in our country.
Amazing. Talk about why you started a new social media platform. What was it going to do that was going to be different than everybody else out there?
Yeah, I think the bitter pill is I still think it's a good idea.
It probably still is, maybe ahead of its time,
Yeah, that's what it was. Yeah, we were thinking years ahead. No, it was a website dedicated to reviewing, and it was kind of built on the idea that you can review anything. And and people built a profile as a reviewer and sort of grew it from there. And we had a ranking system for the more reviews you did and the more sort of engaged people were with your reviews, the more badges you'd unlock and these sorts of things. So yeah, it was, as I say, genuinely in the first few months, we were thinking, bloody hell, I've made something that really works here. Like, people are really using this. And, you're seeing all these reviews appear on the site, which again went from, this is amazing, to, we don't have the server space for all of this content.
And did you have a monetization model?
Yeah, so it was all affiliate linked. So we'd established lots of affiliate. But the idea of the website was that you got money as well. So users would share the affiliate revenue with the website. So you could earn money from reviewing things. And obviously the website took a small percentage as a revenue model.
Nice. Okay. And it's funny how the thing that we're trying to solve for turns into something else, that where people see, oh, you're really good at this, but can you do this? Because this is what we really need. Right. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And I think I remember when we first started speaking to people about, oh, we're going to start our own business, there was a lot of people who said, you don't really have any experience in this at all. But I knew that I wanted to be an entrepreneur. And my philosophy was, if I'm going to fail, like, let's fail now. Let's fail fast. Because I know that this might not be the business. The next 5 businesses might not be the business. But if I learn something through each one, then it's ultimately going to bring me closer to where I need to be. And really, I'm quite fortunate in the sense that, Giraffe was really the second business that I started. And it's really sort of survived the test of time.
Well, 13 years in business, and you're quite young still to have that success, I think. So I'd love to I'd love to hear a little bit about your client base and what are you providing? Because social media is it's a vast word, and there are so many different things, so many different platforms. And so are you working on, just organic social? Do you work on paid?
Basically, anything that happens on social media is our bag.
Okay.
So when we started, we looked around and there were a lot of agencies kind of doing social, but they were doing SEO or they were doing web design. And it very much felt like they started doing one thing. And then when people asked about something else, they said, yeah, we can do that. No problem. And we decided early on that we didn't want to do that. We wanted to just do social media and do it really well. So our services span everything that can happen on social. So we have people in our team who specialize in content creation. We have people who specialize in community management. We have people who specialize in influencer marketing. We do paid ads. A lot of our work now is starting to get into more sort of human first services. So things like employee advocacy, personal brand. We do a lot of exec comms. So supporting some of our the clients we work with, we help their executive teams with their own social media presence, which is always really good fun. So yeah, really anything that happens on social is kind of something that we offer our clients.
Yeah. And you had those naysayers. You started your first business. You at least had a proof of concept, right? It was working. Yeah. And then you had the pivot that's been very successful. Beyond the word of mouth that you had and the early clients, friends, fans, friends who had businesses, how did that evolve? Did you use social as a marketing platform for yourselves, an advertising platform? Or how else did you grow the business?
This is where I should be saying, yes, we use social media. And that was our main platform. But the truth is it wasn't. I think our main success was actually through SEO. So I've always been a bit of a nerd for anything SEO, and so I've always found it really interesting. And we recognized really early on that really for a business to be successful, especially at that time, we needed to be getting organic search traffic. That was where most of our leads would come from. No one knew who we were, so we weren't going to get referrals or word of mouth. We needed inquiries, and we needed a lot of them quickly because we were still figuring it out, so we weren't going to have the highest conversion rate. So that's what we did, is we focused really heavily on our blog, and we did lots of sort of thought leadership sort of style articles, but we also did interviews. We interviewed lots of marketing experts and professors and these sorts of things to really sort of help sort of align the brand with more credible voices. And so we did lots of sort of SEO type activities, and we were really lucky. In the first sort of few years, we started to rank in the top sort of 3 or 4 for some of our key search terms. And we've managed to maintain that for the whole time, essentially. So, most of our business comes through, well, these days, a lot of it comes through referrals, but still to this day, a lot of our inquiries just come through Google organic.
Wow. I have to say that's pretty amazing. I feel like every time I go to Google now, first of all, you see the long AI overviews, and then you have maybe 5 to 10 sponsored posts before you even get to the organic. And it can be really difficult sometimes. We also know that people are using chatbots for search. We also know that people use social media for search.
Yeah.
So I imagine your SEO skills come in handy when it comes to helping, boost your clients on these other.
Yeah. I think it's interesting. We're definitely seeing, for not just for Giraffe, but for many of our clients, that Google traffic is plateauing a little at the moment. I had our first inquiry a few months back from someone who said, "Oh, I asked ChatGPT who I should speak to, and they said you." I was like, wow. I was like, I don't know how we've done that, but that's awesome. I told my team that it was because I always say please and thank you to ChatGPT. So
Yes.
I think that's why. But yeah, so it's how people find us is changing. And I think we're fortunate in the sense that if you sell products, for example, the people going to Google to find you are likely only going to buy one product, right? So they're going to maybe look at a couple of websites, then make a decision. Whereas I think when you're in B2B services, like professional services like we do, inevitably brands are going to ask at least 4 or 5 agencies to pitch or to send a brief to. So long as we're on that first page and our website isn't a complete bin fire, we're probably going to get inquiries, and we do okay. So
yeah. Well, and what was it like developing a successful business? What were some of the mistakes that you made early on that you had to learn from and then, pivot slightly to make sure that you didn't make them again?
How long have we got?
Yeah. Because I've been that, I had a PR agency during the pandemic, and I made a lot of mistakes and did a lot of people want this service. Okay, we can do this and this and this and this, instead of just sticking to our guns. And part of it was because we were virtual. So I had team members who, yes, maybe they knew PR, but they were really better at website design or social media or creating content or whatever else. But that creep scope can, get real really fast.
Yeah, definitely. And we did a little bit of that ourselves. Like, we had clients who wanted a website and we knew how to design a website. And I remember that to be fair, we only did that once. We designed someone a website, and it was, to this day, I stand by it. It was categorically better than what they had. It was so much better than what they had, yet they didn't like it. And it turned into a whole thing. And we thought, we shouldn't be doing this. This isn't something that we know loads about. So yeah, we made those sorts of mistakes. But yeah, I mean, we made loads of mistakes. We still make mistakes. Who doesn't, right? I mean, I think that's one of the great things about growing up, is you realize that everyone is still figuring out. No, you might look at someone and think, wow, they really know what they're doing. Like no one does. Everyone's still figuring out. It's just sort of making it look like you do. I think for us, a lot of our earlier mistakes were probably around team, because I think hiring and managing people is one of the hardest things you can do as an entrepreneur. Yeah, we made some amazing hires that we didn't manage properly. We made some bad hires. Like, we did everything, and we were lucky. We had a lot of really good people. People who were far too good to be working at a small agency like ours with 2 guys who didn't know what they were doing. But what Kane and I have always been really good at is learning, and we're self-aware enough to know that we don't know everything, and ultimately we need to make mistakes to learn. But that's the key, is that when you make mistakes, you do have to learn to change something, to think, okay, well, that's happened. How do we build a process or a system so that doesn't happen again? So Giraffe has really been built brick by brick, mistake by mistake. And I do sometimes reflect on the earlier days and think, gosh, some of those people were so good that we hired. And if they were to come into Giraffe now, they would think, this is a different business. I mean, it's just completely different to what they would have experienced back then. But they're all part of the journey, and they're all part of how we learn to run a slightly better business.
Yeah, absolutely. I know you do a lot of services, but do you have a specific category or two of clients that you prefer to work with?
Ooh. Recently, we've been doing loads of work with education. So we don't really specialize in one particular industry, but you do tend to find that clients and leads come in waves, and you tend to seem to get similar ones over a period of time. So one of the brands we're working with at the moment that we're absolutely loving working with is Kahoot, who are used obviously in schools and in businesses. They're a huge, huge company, and they've got an amazing team. And we're working with them on all sorts of things. And that's been brilliant because they've got all these amazing partnerships with, we just did a whole campaign with the Tour de France and all of these sorts of things. And yeah, so Kahoot are great. So I think education really lends itself to social because there's always such a wealth of like assets and knowledge that you can turn into social content. So we always have a lot of fun working on those sorts of brands.
Nice. And cutting through the idea of virality and, just catching trends versus doing what's native to a brand, what do you see as kind of the stalwarts, the things that work really well time and time again for the brands that you work with?
Yeah, I think with content, obviously trends have a place. I think, especially for certain brands, but they're so transient that, and also, I don't know if you've ever seen it, but there's a meme of people sort of at a party all doing the same trend, and then a brand turns up and does it and everyone leaves. And I do think there is a bit of that, it can be a bit cringe at times. So when we look at content, we always look at the three main sort of types of content, and that is educate, inspire, and entertain. Usually content can fit into one of those three. And when we start working with clients, that's often the first thing we look at when we're doing a content strategy is what seems to be resonating already from those three kind of motivations. And then starting to decide the balance of, okay, well, how much content should be trying to educate, how much should be trying to inspire, and how much should be trying to entertain. And I think often brands make the mistake of leaning too heavily on entertain because they're trying to fit in and they're trying to be cool and be, whereas actually some brands almost don't need to do anything like that. They can just focus on educating and being really interesting and really providing loads of value through their social content. So yeah, that's one of the main things we always look at.
Yeah. When did the book come about and why did you decide to write it?
So the book, again, I feel like all my answers are me just stumbling into things.
That's okay.
Yeah,
I guess
so.
Often the entrepreneur journey.
Yeah, I think so. So we were doing a rebrand of Giraffe and doing a bit of a repositioning, thinking about like what makes us unique and what do we believe about marketing. And for a long time, I'd been seeing these patterns of the types of marketing strategies that seem to be the most effective. The commonality is people, whether it's influencer marketing, you can see someone, whether it's employee advocacy, whether it's, stuff where you're really involving your customers. So I started to think like that's the common thread here between all of the most successful campaigns that we've been running. And when I looked around and I saw most social agencies referring to themselves as social first, I thought, let's be human first. I hadn't even really developed it further than just a bit of a cheeky, no, we're going to put people first rather than, thinking about anything else. And it just spiraled from there, really. The more I sort of thought about it and the more I started putting ideas down, that was when I thought this could be a book. And I've always wanted to write a book, but I've never had an idea that I thought that's original enough and I'm passionate enough to dedicate, hours, hundreds, thousands of hours to writing a book. So the book really was a somewhat selfish endeavor because it was a vehicle for organizing all of this chaos in my mind of, and that and this and, and I think this. And it allowed me to sort of have a breather and think, okay, why does this work? Let me look into the psychology behind this or the sociology behind this. Are there other case studies beyond what we're doing at Giraffe? So the book really is helped me structure our suite of services. Mm-hmm. However, it's also giving people the tools to do this themselves and to sort of incorporate the human first framework into how they market.
Nice. And it's interesting right now, the course I'm teaching, we talk about content production, user-generated versus professionally produced. What happens when somebody creates one that's supposed to mirror the other? What are some different production techniques you can use on either side? What about licensing? All these other issues that come along with that. And we know that user-generated, so to your point, working with influencers, perhaps, right? Depending on if they're really excited about the product or service and engaged with it. But user-generated content, people buy products. They trust it more, right? They want to learn more about it, about products or services because of those types of reviews. But now we also have, of course, generative AI. People are saying, I can get all my content in one swoop. I can have chat or whoever write all of my content. I can use this for images and I can schedule everything. A lot of digital advertising, of course, all the platforms have their algorithms and can pretty much say, hey, give us the creative, give us the budget, and we'll tweak it and we'll find your audience for you. So I'd love to hear your thoughts on that in the changing world, because I feel like there's some really helpful things in there, but at the center of it has to be humans. And it's almost like a novelty when you see AI influencers and you hear AI bands. And I feel like a lot of that is just going to drive people to get more excited about this human-centeredness and this authenticity that can only come from a conversation, right? Yeah. Or seeing an actual person.
Yeah, I think that was also one of the big motivators for Giraffe as an agency to lean in this direction, because what we're seeing, and it's only going to get worse, is as more and more people use AI tools to generate marketing content, it's going to become more and more homogenized, and it's going to become harder to sort of distinguish one brand from another, and everything will start to sound and look the same. And all that's going to do is, like you said, it's going to increase the craving for something real. And I think the pandemic was really one of the biggest driving factors behind this, because as content creators, you had a real supply and demand problem. People were using their phones and scrolling through social more than ever, like to dizzying heights, because we were all bored at home doing nothing. So you had all this demand, but the supply was limited because you couldn't leave your house. So, all the stuff that you would have created in a studio with perfect lighting and all these, that suddenly wasn't really possible. And I think as marketers do, we adapted and started to create less polished content from our homes over, Teams and Riverside, these sorts of tools. And something weird happened, that slightly less polished content did really well. Like outperformed everything else. And it's been one of the things that has remained since the pandemic, is that brands now do this sort of lo-fi style content. And it's because it feels real, and it's something that people can connect to. And if we start going down a route where it's an AI avatar or something, I think, like you touched on it a minute ago, even influencer marketing is slightly less effective than it was, because the audience is a lot more clued up, and there's a question of, is this genuine? Do they genuinely love this product, or are they being paid just to say it's really good? Surely that's even worse with AI, isn't it? It's literally just programmed to say what you want it to say. Right. And I think as people have to label things as AI generated more, which I think is already starting to happen, but I'm sure over the next few years that's going to be a massive topic. Again, people are just going to not credit this with anything. They're just thinking, it's just an AI bot talking about this face cream and why it's so great, So I think that's why human first marketing is kind of the way forward, because that's the one thing that you can't replicate, right? It's just a real person and what they're doing and what's going on in their life and the good, the bad, the ugly. I mean, that for me is what marketing should be.
Yeah, I agree with that completely. But I'm also curious because there are so many social media platforms. Of course, in the US, when TikTok was supposedly going away, we all moved to Red Note, and depending on where you are in the world, countries have these very specific social platforms that are just for them, and everybody else kind of tries to get involved. And then we see Threads, and then you have Blue Note or Blue Sky, and then, do you stay on Twitter/X or do you get off of it because there's still a lot of great conversations happening on it? Then there's LinkedIn, which I think it's funny that they're incorporating Reels, and I feel like I don't really need to see that necessarily if people are talking about stuff that they're just posting it on every platform instead of being specific about what they're posting on different platforms. So how do you continue figuring out how to cut through the noise for your clients to make sure that you're getting the right message out to the right person, the right time, because I do feel like, you were talking about how you didn't really get clients through your own social media. And I will say I used to do much more, but when I had my PR firm, for instance, but now, I know I don't need to rely on social media to grow my podcast audience. I do some digital marketing, advertising. I have great guests and I do other things. And that's, and of course the guests share it usually, but I have to think about time. How much time do I have to invest in tools or a team when I'm still trying to grow this to the point where it's monetized, but it's not monetized enough that I can just say, okay, let me hire you and you and you and do this. So yeah, I'd love to hear from you.
Yeah, I think one of the first things I always say to brands when we first start speaking is don't make the mistake of thinking you need to be on every single platform. And I think a lot of brands do that, and people as well sort of feel like they're missing out. It's that whole FOMO thing, isn't it? Of I have to be on every platform. But the reality is that if you do that, ultimately, you're probably going to end up cross-posting the same content, which isn't really best practice because it gives people no reason to follow you across multiple platforms. You're also going to really blur the lines in terms of who you're speaking to, because when you break down an audience into segments and think about which segment hangs out on which platform, that's really key, is trying to understand like where your audience is. And I always use the phrase like where they hang out online, because we're all guilty of it. We open our phone and we all open a slightly different series of social networks depending on our preference. So it's trying to understand what that preference is. And then every social network also has its own nuances in terms of its own environment, in terms of how things are done, how things are said. And, you talked about Reels on LinkedIn and sort of, there's each one has its almost like its own little microculture that you have to understand to really fit in. So, yeah, I think we're always really hesitant to suggest to clients, oh, you should jump onto this, you should jump onto that, because we prefer having like more timeless strategies where you focus on building a community. And it's very hard to do that when you're jumping from thing to thing, as they appear. If something has longevity and sticks around, it's worth being on it. And to be honest, even with TikTok, it was a crazy time, obviously. I'm sure it was even more crazy for you being in the States, but I don't know, I just never felt like it was not going to come back. I thought it was going to take longer than it did, but I remember seeing like all these creators on TikTok like crying and being like, oh my God. And I was thinking, this will be back in a week. Like, I don't know. It's too popular, right? To sort of not. So yeah, I think from a brand perspective, that would be my advice, is figure out where your audience is and be really, really good and invested into 2-3 platforms, not 6, 7, 8 platforms. Obviously, if you have a massive team and you're capable of being across all of them, great. But most brands don't, and most brands need to be a little bit more strategic about where they're investing their time or their budget. So yeah, that's usually my advice.
Is there a social media platform that you're surprised works really well for clients? Or, for instance, I know for the podcast, Pinterest is surprisingly
That was the one I was
great
going to say.
Oh, isn't that interesting? Because you wouldn't think necessarily that it's as
Yeah.
big as it is if you're not going and doing, creating a mood board or decorating.
Yeah. Yeah, I get my wife sends me plenty of those. Yeah, I think Pinterest is a perfect example of finding your audience, because if your audience crosses over with the Pinterest sort of user base, it's a really diehard community of people who love it, like really love that platform. And I think some of the other social networks, people probably wouldn't say I love it. They almost begrudgingly use it, whereas Pinterest seems to have a real diehard fan base of people who just love the concept of Pinterest. And I think there's certain industries, the obvious ones of like crafts and beauty and design and these sorts of things, where it's amazing. Like it does so well. I remember we were brought in for a brand. They were a watch brand. They sold watches, and they had a fantastic in-house marketing team, but no one knew how to use Pinterest. So we were brought in specifically to run Pinterest ads to drive sales. And we outperformed every other platform that they were doing internally. Like it honestly is. I think if you can get it right and your audience is there, I mean, it can be a really powerful platform. So yeah, I would say that's the one that usually is overlooked. And the other is TikTok, which might surprise you, but when you're speaking to like big B2B, whether it's like learning and development companies or insurance brands or brands that, probably the marketing team are thinking, TikTok, not sure if that's our audience. TikTok is a huge opportunity. It still is. Like there's still a bit of first mover advantage with TikTok, and the way that their algorithm works is so unique from everything else in the sense that you don't need to have loads of followers. You can, if your content's good and it resonates, it will get shown on the For You page and it can blow up. And, you can have 20 followers and have a video reach 1 million people. I mean, there's no other platform where that's possible. So TikTok is another one that I think some of the more traditional, dare I say, boring brands might feel a little bit like they don't belong on TikTok, but TikTok's huge. There's corners of TikTok for everyone.
Yeah. I think people get on TikTok and they think they have to post a lot of content. And sometimes it can be difficult to figure out what type of content. If you're a smaller business, an entrepreneur, that's going to resonate and find the right audience. And so what are some of the strategies that you recommend for somebody?
I think for a small business using TikTok, my advice would be post real content. Don't stage it. Don't think, right, what am I going to post? And right, I'm going to jump on this trend. Post about what's happening in your business, the good and the bad. Post about your morning routine of opening up your shop and what that involves, and share a video of you talking to one of your customers who comes in all the time, and little things that feel real and allow people to build a connection and a relationship to you. Even if it's a parasocial relationship where it's just through your phone.
Yeah.
But yeah, that would be my advice: is don't overthink the content. Just go for real, authentic content and stick it out there. Don't over edit it. Don't overthink it.
Nice.
Just get it out there.
Okay. Love it. And again, going back, we're going to have a link to your organization and your book in the show notes. So when somebody picks up your book, you talked about how they can read it and understand the concept and the construct that you use at Giraffe Social. So are there worksheets or questions, or does it really just talk about your process?
There's too much in there.
Oh.
I had a conversation with my editor towards the end where they were like, this is a big book. There's a lot in here. This could be 2 or 3 books if you wanted to split it up. And I think for me, I read a lot of non-fiction and a lot of, businessy sort of books. There are some amazing ones, but there are also books that I read and think, that could have been a blog post. Like, I don't know if that was a full book, it's been kind of dragged out. And I was desperate for this not to be that. I thought I'm just going to over deliver value, like everything. So there's the first sort of third of the book is very conceptual and about the sort of pillars that underline human first and what the framework's about. And I go into things like company values, how important your culture and your company is. And, if you're going to use human first marketing, but you have an appalling work culture, it's probably not going to work. So I sort of viewed that as the foundation. But the second 2/3 are very practical and it goes through, I split it into 3 sections. So you had your audience, your team, and you. So there are different strategies for different areas. So in your audience, for example, it's talking about user-generated content and influencer marketing and understanding your audience. And, I've created a few frameworks for doing that are slightly different to like the normal customer avatars. And then you have your team. So how do you get your team involved in marketing? So employee advocacy or exec comms. And then the U section is very much about personal brand and how to build like a founder-led business and these sorts of things. So yeah, the second 2/3 are extremely practical and there's loads of exercises, and I'm not allowed to call them exercises because my editor said it was too formal. So I think it says, try this.
Okay, well, kudos to you though, because I agree there are a lot of people who put out books that are very, very short and they're more of a calling card, right? And the fact that you're giving more value, because the reality is, this might be a great book for me to start using with my students at uni and have them make this something they need to read as they're going through. But if you're thinking about the average business person, they may read it, but they're not going to implement the strategies because they don't have time. They don't have the team. They need to focus on what they do best and bringing money into the organization. So it gives them a reason to also think about your agency and you and why it would be good to hire you.
Yeah. And I think when I started writing the book, the first thing I did was I reached out to friends of mine who have written books and who run agencies. And I'm a big believer that when you want to do something, find the people who've already done it and go and make friends with them and ask them those questions. So that's what I did. And there was a real split between, some people said that they wrote the book very much as like a lead generation tool, and there was like downloadable resources and you put your email in, and others sort of went a different direction. And I really, really cherish books. I'm a real sort of book nerd, and I didn't want to do that. I wanted to write a book that could stand alone and someone could pick it up and read it, and they don't have to work with Giraffe. They don't have to maybe not even be in marketing. I mean, I wanted to write something that could be its own thing. And ultimately, yeah, I'm sure we are already seeing it. Like the credibility that comes from being an author helps. But it really wasn't, it sounds like, yeah, obviously you're going to say that, but it really wasn't the motivation at all.
Right.
I think when I drill down into what my core purpose is, it's twofold. One is to encourage more people to pursue an entrepreneurial path, because when I was younger, people dissuaded me and tried to tell me that it wasn't a good idea and that it wasn't stable and it wasn't this. And I really want to encourage more young people to view it as actually it is a path and it's legitimate. And then the other thing is that I think business and marketing specifically can be a force for good. It often isn't, but I think it can be. And the book is really like almost like a manifesto of, this is how I think marketing could be good. I think this is how it, I joke in the book about the comedian Bill Hicks, and he has like a whole bit he does about how, I think he asked the crowd, like, does anyone in here work in marketing? And they say, yeah. And he goes, right, kill yourselves immediately. Like, he refers to everyone as Satan's little helpers. And I remember hearing that and thinking, oh God, am I bad? Am I the bad guys because we're in marketing? So yeah, I'm a big believer that it can be used for good, but it's just how. And that really was the motivation for the book.
Fantastic. This has been such a lovely conversation, Phil. I'm so glad that you were able to join me today. And I want to know, of course, do you have a favorite quote, mantra, verse, poem, family motto, words that continue to inspire you?
I wish I had a family motto. I definitely don't.
Well, you can create one now.
So this book is like one of my favorite books ever. It's Rick Rubin's book on creativity.
Oh.
And it has my favorite quote in it from him. And it actually is the quote that I open the book with. And it's, beware of the assumption that the way you work is the best way simply because it's the way you've done it before. And anyone who's worked with me over the years will know that I'm forever wanting to change everything in the business and right, we're doing this and let's do that. And it really comes from that belief that, yes, there's always a better way to do something. And like, my least favorite quote is, if it's not broke, don't fix it. Because I sort of think, well, yeah, but you know, that's a really limiting way of thinking about things. So
we don't want to be stagnant.
No, exactly. Yeah. So that's my favorite quote.
Love it. Well, that's a great way to end our conversation. So thank you, Phil, for being here. Everybody look up Giraffe Social. You can learn a lot about the agency, how they work. And I'm also going to encourage you all to read the book, because it's something I'm very much a lover of AI tools, but I always say alongside that we still need the expert. We still need the human. And I'm most excited about the fact that we're going to be able to be more human and figure out what that means and take care of each other when we have somebody doing, something else, doing some of our tasks and other work. So
yeah. Awesome.
Yeah. Amazing. And thank you to everybody who's watching this episode or listening to it on your favorite platform. I'll be back again with another amazing guest to share their story and their journey with you. Thanks for listening or watching to this episode of Your Brand Amplified. Don't forget to leave us a rating or review on your favorite podcast listening platform. And if you want to learn more, check us out at yourbrandamplified.com.